Before Saruman ever betrayed anyone, he was the wisest counsel in Middle-earth, the one the elves trusted, the one kings sent for when darkness stirred. His fall wasn't a single moment of corruption. It was a slow erosion, one reasonable decision at a time, until the man who was supposed to save the world had quietly become something closer to what he was meant to stop. Tonight we don't ask what Saruman became. We ask what it cost him to become it, and whether he ever noticed the moment it was already too late to turn back. Saruman's tragedy begins with something almost admirable. He wanted to win. Not through patience the way Gandalf did, trusting small and unlikely people to carry impossible burdens, but through certainty. Saruman believed that if you were wise enough, powerful enough, disciplined enough, you could outthink the darkness instead of merely outlasting it. That belief wasn't evil. It was pride, wearing the costume of responsibility. And that's what makes his fall so quietly devastating. He didn't fall because he stopped caring about Middle-earth. He fell because he never stopped believing he was the only one capable of saving it. Watch how that plays out. Long before any seeing stone, long before any whispered alliance, Saruman begins keeping things from the people who trusted him most. A concern raised and quietly dismissed, a warning that arrives late or not at all. None of it looks like villainy. It looks like a man managing information the way a good leader manages a crisis. Carefully, selectively, for everyone's own good. That's the part worth sitting with. Corruption rarely announces itself as corruption. It arrives disguised as competence, as someone simply doing what needs to be done, because he alone can see the whole board. By the time Saruman turns to older, more dangerous tools to widen his advantage, he isn't looking for evil. He's looking for information, an edge, a way to stay ahead of an enemy he's spent centuries studying. He believes his own discipline will protect him. He believes he's too wise to be the one who gets outmaneuvered. He's wrong, but not in the way people assume. He isn't simply overpowered in a single terrifying instant. He's persuaded, slowly, patiently, by an intelligence even older and more careful than his own, that the world he's watching is beyond saving in the old ways. That the free peoples are too scattered, too weak, too slow. That someone wiser needs to step in and simply take control, for their own good. And here is the quietest tragedy in the whole story. Saruman never stops believing he's the hero of it. Even as he begins to mirror the very darkness he was sent to oppose, he tells himself it's different this time, that his order will be rational, that his control will be righteous, that the ends, a world finally organized, finally safe from chaos, justify whatever he has to become to get there. That's the difference between Saruman and Sauron, and it's worth naming clearly. Sauron wanted domination because domination was the point. Saruman wanted domination because he had convinced himself it was the only remaining path to order. One wanted power for its own sake. The other wanted power because he'd stopped believing anything gentler could work, which is, in some ways, a more human failure. Most of us don't fall by choosing cruelty. We fall by convincing ourselves that cruelty, applied carefully enough, isn't really cruelty at all. You can watch this philosophy calcify into something monstrous once Saruman turns his home into a forge for war. Gardens are torn up, ancient trees are felled. What was once a place of study and care becomes a machine built entirely around the idea that nature, tradition, and gentleness are simply inefficiencies to be cleared away. Saruman doesn't see a living forest when he looks at the woods around him anymore. He sees fuel. That, more than any single betrayal, is the moment his transformation completes. Not when he turns against an old friend, but when he stops being able to see anything as more than a resource to be used. It's fitting, then, that his downfall doesn't come from armies or rival wizards. It comes from the very thing he'd stopped valuing, the old, slow, living world he'd decided was beneath his notice. When the forest itself finally rises against him, it isn't vengeance. It's simply the world reasserting a truth Saruman had convinced himself he could ignore, that some things cannot be reduced to resources without consequence. There is one moment, though, where Saruman's fall almost reverses, where the whole tragedy could have ended differently. Before the forges, before the ruin, he makes one last attempt to bring someone else into his new order. Not an enemy, an old colleague, someone who had once respected him, still trusted by the free peoples in a way Saruman himself no longer was. He lays out his entire vision, carefully, patiently, the way a man explains something he genuinely believes is both true and kind. He isn't threatening, he's persuading. That's what makes it chilling. He truly believes that if his old friend could only see what he now sees, he would agree. And his old friend refuses, not out of stubbornness, and not because he fails to understand the argument. He understands it completely. He refuses because he recognizes exactly where careful, reasonable domination always ends, no matter how gently it's dressed up. That refusal is the last honest mirror Saruman is ever offered. A chance to see himself clearly, through someone who still can. He doesn't take it. Instead, he locks the mirror away, quite literally, and calls it victory. Even in ruin, Saruman has one weapon left, the same gift that made him great in the first place. His voice. Right until the very end, he almost talks his way back into power. Almost convinces even the people who've watched his betrayal firsthand that surely there's been some misunderstanding, some reasonable explanation, if only they'd listen a little longer. That's the most unsettling part of his story. Even stripped of armies, of allies, of any real power left to wield, Saruman remains dangerous, simply because he can still make ruin sound like reason. It's a warning less about wizards, and more about anyone convinced that their own intelligence exempts them from ordinary consequences. What finally breaks the spell isn't a stronger argument. It's someone refusing to be moved by a voice, however beautiful, that no longer matches the truth. That's the quiet, unglamorous answer to how corruption like Saruman's ends. Not with a bigger power defeating a smaller one, but with someone simply choosing not to listen to a lie, even when the lie sounds wiser than the truth. Maybe that's the real lesson buried in Saruman's fall. He was never short on wisdom. He had more of it than almost anyone in Middle-earth. What he lacked, in the end, was the humility to believe he might be wrong. And that gap, small enough to ignore for centuries, was wide enough in the end to swallow him whole. There's a strange kind of mercy hidden in that ending, too. Saruman never gets struck down mid-triumph, still certain of his own righteousness. He's allowed to live long enough to see exactly what his choices built. A ruined home, a broken voice, allies who no longer answer, and the quiet, unbearable knowledge that everyone around him now sees clearly what he spent so long refusing to see in himself. Perhaps that's crueler than any battlefield defeat could have been. Not death, but clarity. The one thing Saruman always trusted above all else, his own judgment, finally turned to show him the truth he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. If this story moved you, there are more waiting. Quiet corners of Middle-earth that history remembers, but rarely feels. Subscribe and walk them with us.